Hi, I'm Ian.
And I'm Jason.
And this is Ghosts and Bears, the only podcast where we bring you the actual ghost stories
With the actual history.
in the actual place. On this very special Halloween episode, we finally get to hear our community's ghost stories. And we're also going to share the experience Jason and I had filming a TV show just last month. Coming up on Ghosts and Bears. Happy Halloween. All right, welcome everybody. We are excited for this Halloween episode.
It's extra long.
It is extra long, and that's because we've got double the stories, double the fun for you. We've got a whole bunch of listener stories.
And a personal story to share.
And a Jason story, which we have kind of been teasing the last couple episodes. We had a pretty profound experience while recording The Other Side on the EP21 network, and Jason is going to fill us in on his personal side of it, which was pretty wild.
It was, well, not just wild, it was life-changing.
It really was. Other than that, we have been just sort of chugging along. I've been doing ghost walks. Jason has come out with me on the ghost walks, and he's taken pictures. So hopefully we can have some more cool pictures coming out with ghost walk pictures. So that'll be fun. And other than that, yeah, just chugging along with ghost walks. I'll be so happy when it's the 31st.
Well, maybe not. Maybe November 1st.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Because
31st is probably going to be really noisy.
It's going to be very noisy, very full of drunk people, and
Lots
I will
of
be.
goons.
Yeah,
Goon night.
It is goon night, 100%. So that will be going on. Otherwise, all our little animals are happy. Things are going well, and yeah. Can you think of anything pretty important or major to talk about?
No.
Is there anything we're missing? We're looking forward to going to Calgary in November.
Yeah, we're heading off to Calgary again.
Yeah, we've got to pick up some speakers.
Yes.
And visit my mom, who just moved into an assisted living place.
That's
which
good
is
for her.
Yeah, she's really happy about it. She's really thrilled, which is nice. That's one great life lesson.
No kidding.
If you're older and you can make a choice about where you live, and it's your choice, you should make that choice.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So we're pretty excited about that for her, because she's excited about it. So that's good. Anything else? Do you have anything exciting to share? No, nothing new.
Not really.
Just keeping on.
Yeah, just work.
Just work. Yeah, I hear you.
Lots of work.
Lots of work. Both of us have lots of work. So we're going to basically jump on into our listener stories. As I said, this is a long episode, so I don't want to use up too much time on this intro. But I just really hope you enjoy it. I think you will. And thank you to everyone who sent those stories in. Thank you for entrusting us with those.
Really big stories. There were fun stories.
Little stories, scary stories. So thank you, everyone, for sending those in, because that was really great.
So without further ado, we'll jump into the show.
We are going to be jumping into ghost stories coming up right after this. This story's from Taya. This is my experience at the Vancouver Easter Seal House in the summer of 2011. We have two differently abled daughters. Both are trached and vented and are in wheelchairs due to the rare genetic peripheral neuropathy they have. They also both have had very severe scoliosis, and this is why we were at the Easter Seal House. They were both getting their corrective surgeries back to back, so to speak, a week apart. And we live on Vancouver Island, so it was easier for all of us to go to Vancouver at the same time and spend a few weeks at Easter Seal House so we could be near the hospital. Due to their condition, the recovery time would be longer, as they could not leave until they could be in their wheelchairs without pain. We were given 2 rooms that had an adjoining door on the ground floor. The building is an L shape, and on the inside of the L is a courtyard. Our rooms had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out at this courtyard. The first week and a half or so, we stayed in one room, and the girls and their nurses stayed in the other. Once both the girls were at the hospital, we were moved into the room they had to make room for another family. We have 2 younger children as well, so we would both be in Vancouver when the girls were actually in surgery, but the rest of the time we took turns coming back to Victoria to be with our other children, so most of the time I was there alone. I did not feel anything when we were in the first room, but we were under a lot of stress worrying about the surgeries, etc. Once we were in the second room, it felt like a man was standing right outside the windows watching me. Because the windows were right at the courtyard level, we kept them closed all the time, but I swore if I pulled the curtain aside, he would have been standing right there. But I knew he wasn't, as I would have seen him through the curtains. Also, this was August in Vancouver, and although it has a reputation for always being rainy and overcast, August is usually very hot and sunny. Despite this, that room was always very dark, even when the sun was shining against the windows. The room had 2 single beds, and I would always sleep in the one further away from the windows. I was working remotely, and when I was working on my laptop, I would feel like someone was standing right behind me, staring at my screen over my shoulder. When I was cooking in the tiny kitchenette, it felt like someone was right next to me, a space a corporeal person would not have fit in. I refused to go into the courtyard as it felt like it was repelling me. It looked like how I expected the garden in the book The Secret Garden would have looked like. Pretty enough, but dark and heavy. The whole building had an uneasy feeling and was dark. It shouldn't have been, as it was brightly painted, etc., but it always felt like it was nighttime. A friend who lived in Vancouver came over to keep me company, and when he came in the room, he said, "Wow, it is dark and heavy in here. Want to go for a walk and get some fresh air?" We decided to check out an older neighborhood nearby. We went down the alley next to the Easter Seal House building, and once we got to the end of the alley and stepped onto the road, it felt like we just exited a dark tunnel, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. The alley was just as dark feeling as the building. I was getting tired of not being able to rest while there. So when I got back to the room, I had a talk with whomever this man was, explaining that I had a lot going on with my kids and I was super worried for them, and that when I was back at the ESH, I wanted to be able to rest and recharge for them. I said I was sorry for whatever had happened that had made him so angry, but I did not cause it, and I would appreciate it if he could take it down a few notches so I could rest. It did get a little bit better. The building still felt dark, but whomever was watching me was no longer there, or was not letting me know he was there. A few days later, the BC Children's Hospital needed the room in ICU for a tragic emergency, and the girls were ill enough to be sent to our local hospital, and I was so happy to be leaving that room. Thank you, Taya. That is actually, you're like the 3rd person to tell me about the Easter Seal House.
How interesting is that?
Yeah, very dark place. I mean, I imagine people are staying there for really sad reasons, so
Yes,
maybe
I
that's
would
why,
imagine
but
why.
yeah. The second one from Taya, would you like to read this one?
Sure.
All right.
My event happened one evening in early spring sometime in the late 90s. Victoria is on the tip of Vancouver Island, surrounded by water, so in early spring it has a lot of fog and mist by the water. My partner at the time and I would often go for drives in the evenings, and since the Victoria Golf Course has a public road that runs through it, we would drive through the golf course. This particular evening had a full moon, and it was misty along the edge of the water, but it had not yet started crawling across land and onto the road. I was not happy with my partner due to finding out recently he had cheated on me because I was young and stupid. I had kept the info to myself and had not yet confronted him. So I spent most of the drive staring out the passenger window at the ocean on my side. As we approached the golf course area, I noticed the mist was getting thicker. I looked out the front of the car and saw the thick mist, not yet fog, had tendrils reaching across the road ahead of us. It looked like mist fingers reaching out of the ocean as if it was going to grab something off the golf course and drag it back into the sea. I noticed a figure standing at the side of the road, a small distance ahead of us. It seemed to be glowing, but I assumed since the figure was in white that it was due to the mist and full moon shining through it. As we got closer to the figure, I could see that it was a woman. I wondered why this woman was in the middle of the golf course alone at night for a second, but it wasn't that late and the road did run through the golf course. I kept watching her just in case she was in distress. As we came parallel to her, I saw she was staring away from the road towards the ocean. When my window came next, to her, she suddenly turned towards me and put her finger to her lips as if to shush me. I was startled and turned to my partner to see if he'd seen her, but he cut me off and dismissed me. Basically, he shushed me. I turned back to my window, but she was gone and she was not in the mirror. I turned around to see if I could see her behind us in the back window, and I saw a glowing misty figure moving further out on the golf course. I listened to the St. Anne's, St. Joseph's episode, and it reminded me of something that happened to me down there in the early 2000s when I was pregnant. I was living in an apartment building on the corner of Quadra and Southgate, and I worked at the Leather Ranch in the Bay Center. I would walk home after work, and if it was dark out, I would go down Humboldt to Quadra instead of cutting through St. Anne's grounds because it felt weird. I think this was while they were converting the St. Joe's building into apartments. Every time I would be passing the St. Joe's, a light would come on in the window in the top floor. I assumed it was motion sensor or time light. I didn't really think about it because I was pregnant and tired and just wanted to get home. One night, I'm walking home, and for some reason I was watching the St. Anne's building as I'm walking. I realized that I'm seeing out some kind of dark figure on the roof near the bell tower. At least I think it was a bell tower. I was suddenly cold and scared. Then the light in the window of St. Joe's comes on and distracts me. When I looked back at St. Anne's, the figure is gone. I wonder if the whatever in the one building was trying to keep my attention away from the figure so it wouldn't scare me and possibly put me into labor. I seem to have a story about almost every place you guys do locally. When my kid was young, we did a photo shoot with her and her friend Ross at Ross Bay Cemetery. At one point, we are down by the area the nuns are buried, and I was going to take some photos, but a man was sitting on a bench facing the ocean down in the corner, so 30 or so feet away from us. I was figuring out where to place two girls for a photo. My daughter says, we should face this way. Instead, you don't get... we should face this way instead, so you don't get that man in the background. What man? Says her friend. Both of us pointed at the man and said him at the same time. The friend, her mum, and my husband all say, who are you pointing at? They could not see him, and we could. Then he was just gone. We quickly moved to another part of the cemetery.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there's a bunch of places in there. The golf course we are going to do an episode on.
100%.
It's pretty much Victoria's most famous ghost story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually why I didn't put it in Victoria's Most Wanted.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of been done.
Yeah, it's pretty much, it's overdone.
But a lot of people have experienced her. And she's got a pretty tragic backstory. So we're going to cover that in our episode.
Oh.
I also like that she talked about St. Joseph's and St. Mary's. That's pretty cool.
That's a nice place.
And the cemetery. Like, holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for those, Taya.
Thank you, Taya. And happy Halloween to you.
Yeah. Next one is from Sandy. In July of 2020, we welcomed our first child. After a few days in the hospital, we came home with our little bundle of joy. The nursery, which had always felt warm and inviting before the arrival of our daughter, suddenly felt cold. Actually, physically cold. Side note, we live in Texas, and the summer temps are regularly in the triple digits. I didn't feel uncomfortable in the room, but it did feel like someone was looking over my shoulder and watching my every move. To make matters worse, the baby monitor would send movement notifications when the room was empty. I'd pull up the video history and look to see what was setting off the movement alarm, but there was never anything visible in the video. It culminated one night when I was up feeding the baby. The only light in the room came from a small touch-activated lamp. Tap it twice to turn it on or off, and press and hold to brighten or dim the light. The little lamp was on its dimmest setting, as it was the middle of the night, and I was sitting in the rocker with the baby when the lamp started to grow brighter. I was irritated and said out loud, "I have enough light, thanks," in a tone that expressed my annoyance and frustration. As soon as I said it, the light dimmed itself. Now, you could say that it was lack of sleep from having a newborn in the house, and I imagined the whole thing, or maybe the lamp was faulty, but it's never done that since, and the lack of sleep does not explain the baby monitor going off. But I think I know who was in the nursery that night. Just a few days before our daughter was born, my husband's grandmother passed away. She was elderly, but in fair health. She went to the hospital for a routine surgery. The operation went well. She was recovering when she took a sudden turn for the worse and passed away. While it wasn't a shock given her age and the raging pandemic, We were still saddened by her loss and knowing she would not get to meet her newest great-granddaughter. I believe Nanny, my husband's name for his grandmother, did meet her great-granddaughter. She wasn't going to let a little thing like death stop her. My daughter is a year and a half old now, and the activity in her room has all but stopped. There have been a few times my daughter has been talking with someone who doesn't show up on the baby monitor. I hope it's just an imaginary friend.
Wow.
That's cool.
Oh, that's really neat.
It's actually really sweet. And there's a lot of stories about family members coming and hanging out and saying goodbye and all those things.
Well, I finally experienced that firsthand.
Which we're going to make the very last story. Keep people listening.
That was the most insane experience of my life.
It was pretty insane for me too, and it wasn't even anybody I ever met.
Huh. Well,
our next story
is from Bryce, thank you. Here are a few experiences that have happened to me over the years. I quite often feel the moods of locations more than anything. I grew up in James Bay for the first 13 years of my life, so it was a great area as a kid to explore and get into trouble. I remember myself and a bunch of kids from the neighborhood would play on this big empty lot on Dallas Road and around Simcoe near the Coast Guard station. Yeah, there's no empty lot there.
No.
It was just a giant lot with overgrown bushes and one big oak tree, if I remember correctly. And near the tree, there was what looked like foundations of a fairly big house, which, of course, we made a fort near the tree. Every time I went to that abandoned lot, I always felt uneasy and like someone was watching me. Just a general creeping feeling. But only around the tree, and foundations everywhere else was fine. Another more recent experience I had is at the James Bay Inn, where I stayed up to 4 times a year when I come over to visit from the mainland. I usually stay in the same corner room on the same floor every time, as it's my favorite room. I call it the King Blue Room as it has a king-size bed and the room has a blue wall. Although I've never felt anything uneasy or bad in the room or hotel, I do remember on more than a few occasions laying in bed in the hotel room by myself and feeling someone sit on the edge of the bed. The first time this startled me, but now I just say hi to whoever is there with me and say goodnight before I fall asleep. When I was 13 in the late 90s, I moved with my family to Edmonton, and like I said, I've always had the ability to feel the vibes of locations. While the junior high I went to, Westmount Junior High, is an amazing, beautiful, Gothic-looking building from the 1900s, but wow, does it ever have dark and uneasy feelings in the building. It was used as a hospital during the Spanish flu, with some estimates of over 400 deaths in the school. I even remember downstairs what was used as the wrestling room. Formerly the morgue had a different style, almost heavier door when I went to the school, and it was always almost heavy and suffocating in that room no matter the time of day. There was a relatively famous ghost of Felicia Graham. She was a teacher and then a nurse who worked at the school and then disappeared one day, and they found her body in the river a year or so later, but we would always hear noises and see shadows in places where there should be none. The night janitors would constantly hear footsteps in lockers opening and closing by themselves at all hours of the day. I also do believe the fact that the school is so close to the Camsell TB hospital for residential schools is less than 2 blocks from there and has something to do with the activity. Well, those are just some of the stories. I hope you can get through the horrible writing skills. And I just wanted to say I have a huge fascination in history, so I love the fact that you tell us stories, experiences, and history of the locations.
Thanks so much for that, Bryce. Yeah, that's awesome. And don't ever feel bad about the terrible writing style.
No, whatever.
You should read my books.
Well, they're pretty good. And you wrote well. So, yeah, when I said it's not like that anymore, it's all overbuilt at this point.
Exactly. This one's from Elise. Now, Elise heard our last episode on the Stanley Hotel that Brooks helped us out with, and she sent this in. Following up on the Stanley and my own experiences. My name is Elise, and I love the podcast. Thanks, Elise.
Thank you.
I was listening to the Ghost Stories We Have Heard episode that talks about the Stanley Hotel, and I thought I might as well talk about some ghost stories I've experienced and have heard since I'm currently living in Colorado and go to CU Boulder, where, fun fact, Stephen King used to teach in the 70s. The first 2 stories are my own personal encounters. The first happened when I was in middle school visiting Old Town, Quebec. We stayed at a small old boutique hotel. I don't remember the name. It was in French. Fair enough. The lobby and the rooms were in separate buildings, and the buildings where we slept were pretty old. I think they said it was from the 1600s. The walls were stones and plaster, and the dark wood on the ceiling looked very worn and old. The whole time I was in the hotel room, I felt like I was being watched, and just extremely uncomfortable. I remember I felt like I was even being watched by something unseen while in the bathroom and showering, which made me extremely uncomfortable as well, and I probably took the quickest showers of my life while I stayed there. For the night we were there, I hid under the covers and wore a hat over my head to bed to drown out the sound and prevent a ghost from touching my head. I don't know what I was thinking. I was a weird kid. Even though I was extremely overheated, I stayed under the covers all night and listened to what sounded like loud clanging, moving of furniture, and someone in heels stomping around above us. No one in my family slept well, and we found out that there was no one staying on the floor above us. There was one room per floor. The second story happened while I was on the day history tour at the Stanley. I haven't been on the night one yet. I'm a scaredy cat, plus I don't really want to drive the winding mountain roads at night. When we walked into the music room of Mrs. Stanley's, I all of a sudden got really emotional and started crying out of nowhere. It was really hard to bottle up and stop this weird emotion. The tour guide said at the end of the tour that this sort of thing was common. Interesting.
Wow.
Some ghost stories from my school, CU Boulder. There are supposedly a few haunted buildings and dorms on my campus. The first is Mackey Auditorium, where people performing spot ghosts in the audience wearing old-fashioned attire, and in the 60s, a student was murdered in the stairwell of the auditorium and is also said to haunt the place. I also went on a date with a guy who worked as a night security guard at the campus memorial center. I ghosted him, but that's a whole different kind of ghost story. He told me that while working the night shift, he saw a shadow figure wearing flannel walk down a hallway and disappear. They also caught on camera a ghost of an old hag wearing all white rags enter a bathroom. They checked the bathroom after reviewing the footage, and no one was there. There are also lights that turn on and off repeatedly, blinds in the window that go up and down mysteriously when no one's in the room, and the sound of bells ringing throughout the halls, even though there are no bells in the building. Another fun but creepy fact is the cafeteria. In that, the building is named after Alfred Packer, who was a renowned cannibal in Colorado during the 1800s. What a great name, great person to name the cafeteria after. Okay. I've also felt really uncomfortable while in the arts building, which is adjacent to the Memorial Center, while alone at 10 p.m. at night. Although the building is super newly built in 2008, I heard weird noises, kind of like footsteps when no one was there, as well as thinking I saw shadows out of the corner of my eyes walking past me in the hallway. I could just be over-paranoid and an overtired art student. Well, it doesn't matter if a building's new, as we have learned.
That's right.
It's really what was on that land before.
Correct. 100%.
So, not a big shock there. And yeah, I'm sure you were tired, but sometimes being tired can actually lower our resistance to things.
Yes.
And we can perceive more.
Correct.
Yeah. Pretty interesting. Thank you for those.
Yes. And we have one from Aaron. In the mid-1980s, my parents and I were driving along the historic Stagecoach Trail that goes through southwest Wisconsin and northern Illinois. We were on our way to Warren, Illinois to visit my dad's grandmother. It was summertime, and in that part of the country, agriculture is a main part of life and business. We were passing fields and livestock along the way, and I remember the rich smell of freshly cut hay was strong. On a slight rise in the road, I saw a guy who I assumed at first must have been a Civil War reenactor. He was utterly, completely solid, all there, all visible. He was wearing a ragtag and ensemble of clothing. Most of it seemed blue or faded black, but he was all dusty. This was significant as the road was paved and the shoulder was gravel. There was a wide green hayfield to the guy's right, with the alfalfa maybe only 8 inches tall. I noticed the guy had yellowish-gray dust all over him, and as we passed we could see he looked exhausted. He did not look up at us, but we could see his face, his tired posture, and his mussed hair. These impressions in just the time it takes to pass someone walking next to an open road. Then we went into the little valley just after the rise, and I looked at my mum. I could tell her expression that she had seen him too. We both thought it looked like the guy needed some help. There was something strange about him, and he didn't look well. We begged my dad to turn around. He said he had seen no one, but humored us. We did turn around within 3 minutes tops, and we were back to the same spot, and the man was nowhere but to be seen. We couldn't figure out where he'd gone in such a short time. At the top of the rise, the view was wide, and the nearest farm was far enough away that he would not be able to get there that fast on foot. There was no way that he was lying in the field of alfalfa was so low, and the ground was pretty much flat. My dad never did see the guy, and to this day suspects my mom and I were pulling his leg. Wow.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool.
Well, so often it's the dads who don't see stuff.
Yes.
They're just so closed off.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Worst is when they make fun of it. But thankfully, her dad didn't do that. He just thought they were teasing him.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
This one's from Julie. This is an interesting one. I currently live in central Mexico, but I'm from Denmark. You got that part? Mm-hmm. Okay. Hopefully I'll be moving back to Europe in the near future, but for the moment, I'm living here with my husband and our 7 rescue dogs.
Wow, that's busy.
Lucky dogs. I've always been a believer in all things weird and paranormal, even though I was always told it was stupid, not socially acceptable. Same. I never experienced anything back home, and my greatest wish was always to see a ghost or UFO when I was little. When I moved to Mexico, where the energies are much stronger, I started having small experiences, but nothing really interesting. We had a ghost of a woman in our kitchen at our old apartment. We only saw her in a flash as she walked by the small window in the kitchen door at night, and she was never there when we went out there, and she didn't do anything than walk around the kitchen. My old roommate always had an altar for Dia de los Muertos, and one time it seemed to bring some negative energies into the apartment, giving me intense nightmares every night for 2 weeks straight. And one time I was at work, and he heard me calling his name from my room. One night I went to the kitchen for something to drink and accidentally knocked all of our takeout menus on the floor because I was too lazy to turn on the light. I decided to just pick them up in the morning and went back to bed. Of course, I got up late and ran off to catch the bus and forgot all about the mess I made. When I got home in the evening, my roommate asked why I'd put all the menus on his altar. None of us had touched them after I'd knocked them down. I also had a visit from a dog I rescued from the street, but we had to euthanize her because she was really sick. It was just a feeling that something was moving towards me in bed, and there was a strong smell of dog. I let her lie down in bed with me, and after a while, she was gone. In our new house, I saw a shadow person, ghost, in our bedroom when I was home alone. It started as just a strange shadow being cast by the light from the curtain, moving because of the open window, but it started taking shape and slowly became completely solid. It was a young man in a hoodie, standing in the corner staring at me like he was deciding if he should attack me or not. He looked like an actual person, not just a shadow. Then I remembered your podcast saying that it can never hurt to be nice to the spirits, so I said, "Hello, welcome to our house. You're welcome to visit," or something to that effect. Then I started wondering if it could understand me. What if it was a Mexican ghost who didn't understand English? Then I thought that since they're no longer attached to this plane, maybe they no longer have languages, and they understand everything. What are your thoughts on that? That's a good question.
Well, we know that they know the native tongue from our experience, because there was the previous show that was shot about a week before, and the communicator had to speak Cantonese. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's true. So maybe they do only speak the languages they die with.
That's right.
That would make sense, I guess. Well, he just kept staring at me, and then he slowly faded away, and he hasn't been back since. My husband's religion is Yoruba, which is a branch of Santeria. He has a witch spirit that has been following him all his life, looking out for him. She is not a friendly spirit, but she doesn't do anything. One night I was home alone washing the dishes, and I saw her as a shadow standing right behind me in my reflection in the window. Once I was sure it was her, I said, "Hello, nice to meet you." I was sure she was there to check on me to make sure I wasn't doing anything I wasn't supposed to, since my husband was away. I guess she was satisfied because I looked down for a second, and when I looked back up, she was gone. We also have something that turns off the water heater and microwave on occasion, which means that we might take a cold shower even though we turned the heater on, and my food was left cold. Wow, that was a lot more than I thought it would be. I'm sorry. You can use it if you want, but I know they're not the most interesting stories, and there are a million others like them. And if you do find a reason to come to Mexico, you are more than welcome. We can take you around to a bunch of haunted places where I'm sure you would sense plenty.
I would be very grateful. That would be a lot of fun.
Thank you for those.
Yes, 100%.
Julie, those are really cool. And also, what a cool living situation.
Absolutely.
Being from Denmark, living in Mexico. I do apologize for my pronunciation of the Spanish words. We're Canadians, so it's mostly French. And I understand I may have butchered them, and I do apologize. But mad respect for those stories and for the things you've seen. And your unflappable attitude towards them.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Good for you.
Our next one.
This is from our friend Jack. In April of 1999, my dad and I rented a van, literally from a place called Rent-A-Wreck. Yes, I'm aware of it. And set out to my uncle's house in Elkford, British Columbia, to retrieve furniture from my grandmother and grandfather's house that was originally in Kimberley, British Columbia. Less than a year before, my grandmother had passed away at the young age of 76. Back then, that seemed old. My grandfather could no longer live on his own at Kimberley and was making the move to Calgary to be closer to my family. My dad and I needed to retrieve the furniture from my uncle and drive it back home the next day. The trip was uneventful, and once we arrived, we ate quickly and went to bed as we were tired. My dad and I were sleeping in the same room in my uncle's basement. The basement was not your typical basement. It was more of a first floor. The event as follows is what I can recall to the best of my knowledge. The image in my mind is still as clear as today as it was that very night over 23 years ago. I remember waking up sometime in the night and immediately sitting up in bed. I was young at the time, around 13 years of age. I didn't like sleeping alone in the basement, so my dad was next to me. As I sat up, I could see in the doorway to the far right a silhouette of a person, but all in black. I could see no distinguishable features, just a shape like a shadow. I was not scared, just curious. The thing is, I knew immediately that it was my grandmother. I didn't need to see any features to know that. It was her, and I'm 100% positive of that fact. I was also very much awake. I remember my dad asking me to lay back down, and I could not really respond as I was in shock. When I was younger and we could visit my grandparents in Kimberley, my brother and I would always share a room. Every night before she went to bed, my grandmother would stop in our doorway and just look in the room. She would do that for about a minute and then proceed on to bed. I believe that she returned that night in my uncle's basement to do it as one final parting gesture. I never got to say goodbye as her passing was sudden. I think this was her way of saying goodbye. It is a memory and event that I will never forget, and I am eternally grateful for her for doing this. She was an amazing woman.
That's really cool.
Yes, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. He had a second story. One night, a few years back, I was sitting in my room in my parents' house. I was facing my doorway, which also looks at my parents' room. My mom was standing in her doorway facing me, and we were talking about something. All of a sudden, she and her room were engulfed in this very bright emerald green color. It was blindingly bright. I completely froze, and she asked me what was wrong. I bolted up and went into her room. I was looking for a sign of a light that burnt out or something. Anything, really. I said, "Did you see that?" And she said, "No, see what?" I was the only one to see that light, or whatever it was. It was so bright, I thought that there was no possible way she couldn't have seen it. I truly have no idea what it was or what it meant. It was not a scary situation, just one that has left me dumbfounded. There is no explanation for it. Maybe it was a relative stopping by to see us. Maybe it was an alien. You never know.
Could be.
And our last story from our listener stories, this one is from Jamie.
When I was 21 years old, my new husband's family offered to sell us a house that had been in his family for generations at an incredibly cheap price. They had a difficult time keeping it rented and did not want to hassle with it anymore. We jumped at the opportunity and moved in almost immediately. It was only a matter of hours before strange things began to happen. It did not take me long to decide there was something or someone else other than us in that house. Almost every night, we would hear something coming up the staircase. The steps were old, so you could hear every creak. Nick, my husband, would jump out of bed whenever he heard it to go and make sure that someone hadn't broken in. It would always end the same. No one was there. The ghost appeared to get braver as time went on. We could hear the steps eventually coming down the hall. They were getting a little closer to our bedroom door with each visit.
Okay, that's not cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. Finally, the night came where we had both been dreading. Nick was sound asleep, exhausted from working hours of overtime. I heard the steps dare to pass the doorway of our bedroom and enter our room. I felt slightly aware of something or someone approached the side of the bed I had my back turned to, but I was too afraid to look. I just kept my face in Nick's chest and closed my eyes tightly. I felt as though there was something or someone right behind me, right behind my head, just staring at me. I knew one thing for sure: I was not going to turn around to check. I just wanted to fall back asleep as soon as possible. My hand searched under the covers for Nick's hand. I very softly and quietly moved my hand beneath his big palm. I did not want to disturb him. I just knew it would make me feel better if his hand was lying on top of mine. My back felt ice cold. I tried to bring the covers up tighter around my neck and my back. That's when I felt it. Something moved briefly on the bed behind me. I did not acknowledge it. I forced myself to stay still as if I were still asleep. I felt that if I suddenly reacted, I would see something horrible, so I did not turn around. I did not move. That seemed to upset whatever was behind me. I felt the bed move again, but just ever so slightly. I felt that whatever was behind me was so close to me it was almost touching my hair. I had the feeling in my scalp similar to when you have static electricity in your hair. I was sure it was almost be standing on end. I rubbed Nick's palm with the back of my hand. I think it was actually trying to wake him, but trying to do so quietly so whatever was behind me would not notice. It didn't work. Nick just grunted for a moment and then took another deep breath. He was still sound asleep. I felt another movement on the bed directly behind me again. I actually could feel the blanket I had wrapped so tightly around me tug on me a bit, as if someone had just laid some weight on it beside me. I was sure that something was trying to get even closer to me. Suddenly I felt air blow on my cheek. Oh my goodness. It was just the same as if someone had breathed on me, except it was a lot colder. Ice cold. I tried rubbing Nick's hand again, only I did it a lot more aggressively this time. He moaned a little and turned to face me, laying his arm across my side. That made me feel a bit better. If there was someone or something directly behind me that was struck them with his hand when he put his arm around me. I no sooner had the thought that when Nick's arm went flying off me and back towards him, it was as if someone had picked up his arm and flung it off me. At the same exact moment, I felt a very strong tug on my hair and heard a whisper in my ear, "Get out of my room." The words struck with me like a knife in my stomach. It was a very raspy, mean voice. I woke Nick instantly, but once again there was no one there. Many things happened in that house. We only lived there for 36 days. 36 days of pure mental hell. That was when I started to believe in ghosts and spirit hauntings. It forever changed how I view things.
It would.
Yeah, no kidding.
It would. And honestly, the people who I've met who are like, oh, I don't believe in ghosts.
Yeah.
They do once something like this happens to them.
It is profound.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for all the stories you sent in to make our Halloween episode that much more interesting. We are going to come back after this, and Jason and I are going to tell the story of our experience on that TV show. And Jason had a very personal encounter with someone who's gone on before.
Wow.
We'll be back right after this. All right. Well, thanks everyone for sending in all those great stories.
Yes, thank you very much. They were great to read.
They were amazing. I'm going to keep a couple set aside. We've got one bunch that came in about the famous golf course here in Victoria.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
So we're going to save those for an upcoming episode because you may or may not know this, but if you ask anybody, are there ghosts in Victoria, the first story they're going to tell you is the golf course.
Yeah,
so
amongst other things.
Yeah,
sure.
But that's kind of why we haven't done it yet, because everyone knows it. But now that we've got some first-hand reports, we've got some other reports, we're definitely going to cover that one on an upcoming episode.
100%.
But as promised, what everyone has been waiting for is really kind of the biggest ghosty thing that happened to us.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Probably my entire life.
Yeah, I'd say ever. It was a bit of a shock for me too. And that's what we promised we would tell you, and that is what we are here to deliver. So a little background, if you don't know, Jason and I went on a show called The Other Side.
It's from shown on the APTN network.
Which is the Aboriginal People's Television Network.
Yep.
And it's in its 9th season. We were filming the 9th season, so the 8th season is just
airing right now.
Yes.
Pretty much.
And it is also been sold to 11 different countries, which is kind of cool. So it's an international show.
It was a lot of fun.
They asked us to be on it because of the Yates building. There's a chapter in Victoria's Most Haunted, my book, that is on that. And Jay and I also did an episode on the Yates building.
Yes.
So they asked us to be on, and what they do is they bring you on as guests, and they have you film with them from 1 p.m. until 1 a.m. On the Friday, 1 p.m. to 1 a.m. on the Saturday, and then 1 p.m. to 6 a.m. on the Sunday as sort of a closing time and all those good things. We went, I've shared this opinion before. I've been on ghost investigations before, and I honestly find them boring. It's just not my thing. I'm not a ghost hunter. I love the stories. I love ghost stories. I love people stories. I love history, but I'm just not a big ghost investigator. And mostly it's because honestly, they're just kind of dull. So that's kind of how I went in. Jay, what was your experience with ghost hunts before this?
Well, I've never been on one. So when I was interviewed, they said, "What are your goals?" And I said, "Well, I've never been on one, but I'm walking in with an open heart and open mind. I'm jumping into the deep end of the pool. I don't really know much about the show. What I can tell you is the last time I tried entering this building a few years ago, it stopped me." And I'm like, fair enough, goodbye. So yeah, we went through the opening ceremony.
We did smudging.
Respectful.
Yeah, very respectful.
I've
smudging.
never done smudging before. So Chief Lee Crowchild was the elder on site and explained to me how smudging works. And it was great. They have to smudge the entire camera crew, all 15 of us.
Everybody gets smudged.
Yeah.
And it's a very small crew. Just to give you, they consider it like, what's the word? Like a documentary crew. Yes. It's not a big, lavish production. It's very, very simple. And Jay and I neither of us had ever seen the show, so we didn't really know what the setup was. I'm really grateful because when we left, they gave us some DVD copies of previous seasons, and I was impressed because a lot of these ghost shows, I don't know, you kind of get the feeling they manufacture things and this kind of thing. This show, we watched it after we'd recorded with them, but they went to one theater that was supposedly very, very haunted, and the entire show, nothing happened. But they showed it that way, and they said, like, flat out, sometimes this happens. Sometimes you get nothing.
I think they said
but
that
I was impressed
the
by that.
second time in 4 seasons that it happened.
Yeah,
so.
But I was impressed by that they showed it, because a lot of places might have been tempted to fake that.
Yeah, there's no theater. There's no pantomime.
No.
It's very raw. It's very real.
Yeah. So I'm just going to sort of run down. We did do the show. We did our pre-interviews, as Jason mentioned. We had our first night where we did get in touch with a spirit, which was quite strong, quite profound. As we were leaving that night, I said to Jason, just so you know, this is not normal. This is not how this usually goes. And then we were going back in for the second night, and we were kind of like, okay, well, we're doing this. We were both tired. Oh, Randy's got something to say. We were both tired. We were both kind of done with the whole thing, but we knew we had to go back downstairs and we had to do it again, and we were certainly feeling the pressure. So then we go down there, we start talking, and all of a sudden Jeff, the host, says, am I picking up a certain spirit named Dave or David? And that's when Jason grabbed my arm. And Jason, what happened then?
Yeah. So how we communicate, there's a few different methods. The first night, basically, we walked in with, I believe it's called a K2 meter, and Shan basically establishes, touch this machine.
Shan was one of the hosts.
Yes. Touch this machine once for yes, twice for no. And so not only do we do the once for yes, twice for no, Shan goes on to kind of establish, if you'd like to communicate a message and you don't have the energy to speak through the spirit box or the other meter that that
Is that the obulus? That was
I think the
other thing,
obulus.
right?
Yeah, I don't know all the technical terms. Anyways, she can go through the alphabet. So I ask a question, it goes off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there stunned. This is impossible. There's no corporeal form in this room. And,
Oh, and to be fair, we all had to shut off our phones. Like, they were really taking precautions to make sure there was no outside interference that would mess with the equipment. So that's the other thing you need to know is background.
Yeah, they minimize background noise. We did hear noises in the hallway, and it's a pretty creepy hallway. It's cool because Jeff stops the recording and asks, "Is anyone moving around upstairs with the bass team?" And they respond, "No." So all of these were real.
Yeah, legitimate.
They were raw.
Yeah, it was very legitimate.
It was profound. It was shocking. It defies all the logic and pragmatism that I'm well educated, very well read. It just there's no rhyme or reason to be able to articulate what happened those 2 nights.
Yeah. So let's take us into the room for the second night.
Yeah. So Jeff asks, he suggests I'm feeling a Dave or David, and Ian was standing right next to me, and I grabbed his arm hard. This is dark. We're in the dark.
Oh yeah, we're in the darkness
because they were using the infrared lights.
Yeah.
What shocked me more than any of this was there were 3 very different spirits, but I sensed something on the Friday night. So we're talking the Saturday night when he talks about David. And I know I swore on the mic and I said, no, that's impossible. And I just went silent because I didn't know what to say.
The other thing was I noticed, and I think you saw this too, is with the electrical meter sensor thing, when we were talking to other spirits, it was almost tentative or kind of slow moving. When David came through, it was bang, bang.
Yeah,
it was incredibly strong.
I believe that even Jeff, who is seasoned, like this is his 9th season of recording, was genuinely shocked. I looked over and I could see him through the light a bit, and you could see that he was even a little startled by these reactions being so forthright. So that's when I knew the, so to speak, hit the fan, because I saw Jeff's reactions were
pretty shocked.
Yeah. Interesting. And I sat there in disbelief. Now I completely understand what suspension of disbelief is. And, it brought up some emotions for me, like it's interesting considering philosophy and looking at all that and talking about, Socrates saying, "I'm wise because I know nothing." That is suddenly brings that all into focus.
Yeah, because you really don't know what's happening.
Holy smokes. I mean, this thing is responding to questions like immediately. There's no one else in the room. There's the 4 of us, the team, and then there's the sound guy and the camera guys, right? And yeah.
So basically, do you want to give a little bit of backstory on your brother? Because that's who David is to you.
So my brother committed suicide on his 21st birthday, August 29th, 1992.
So 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
This year. And you have mentioned it before, but this year it was really bothering you. This year really, really stuck with you. And I could see that. And I didn't know how to fix it, but I thought, well, you need to move through it.
That's not something you can fix. There were some things that I was holding over.
But when you love someone, you want to try and fix things.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked to my psychologist about it. I went through all sorts. Some of it had to do with the fact that I threw away a painting that he created for myself, and I regret every day that I threw it away.
Okay, but you were 14.
Yes.
And you were angry.
Yes,
so
of course.
You can't, I know.
So when Jeff goes ahead and says, "Are you angry?" and this machine goes right off, I'm like, okay, this is not cool. I didn't know what to say. I'm just like, yeah, that probably is David. And Jeff proceeds to ask, "Does anyone in this room know who David is?" And I waited maybe 5 or 10 seconds. I'm like, yeah, I do know. that's my brother.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because at the...
and then the machine went, yes, when you said that.
You know, we had a discussion about this because the other presents that we sensed on Friday had some issues the year before, and we were trying to determine if it's okay to talk about suicide. And I said, it's totally fine. We're acknowledging it. Mm-hmm. So I ask, I'm like, yeah, that's my brother. And so I said, David, is that you? And boom, it went off.
Yeah.
Immediate.
Yeah.
Straight into the red.
And very strong.
To the point where the green light went off. So this meter goes from green to red and basically sits at green the whole time. And this thing is in the center of the room, not able to be manipulated. No one's touching it. It's sitting on a chair.
Yeah, that's right. It was.
You know, and I'm just sitting here thinking, Jesus, that's him. That's 100% him.
Yeah.
And my next question was like, are you mad about the painting? And it goes, boom, right off the charts. Yes. And I'm like, yeah. Okay. I'm like, now I'm tensing up. You will see me bawling on national TV. You will be seeing me clenching my teeth. My hands are getting clammy, and I'm basically tearing off Ian's left forearm because he was standing next to me, and I'm like, this is impossible.
Yeah.
But it's definitely him.
You even brought up something that only he would know, like a story you've never even told me about the chocolate milk.
Yeah. So, you know, there was... to break the tension, because I could see that there was a lot of tension in the room.
Oh, yeah.
I said it was more of a test, and I said, do you remember that night that I was really sick and you gave me HP sauce instead of hot chocolate? And it goes, bam, yes. And I started laughing, and I said, well, I forgive you for that, but it wasn't a nice joke.
Yeah.
I mean, he certainly convinced me, and I finally drank it. Oh, gross. I've never had HP sauce in my entire life after that. I said that. I've never ever touched it again. Never had it before, never had it afterwards. So, you know, it was interesting. And it was interesting to see even the camera guy and the sound guy laughing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's how tense that room got.
Yeah.
And I said, are you alone? And it goes boom, boom.
Yeah. I think David had to fight through some other energy in that building, because there were a number of energies in that building.
Yeah.
He had to really fight to hold his place there.
Correct.
And I think they were quite annoyed that he kind of pushed his way in.
That's right.
But he was there for a reason.
He was there for closure.
Which
blew me away.
And Lee Crowchild even said to you, he goes, he's not mad about the painting anymore. He wanted you to know he was upset.
Yeah.
And then you asked him a very specific question about the priest.
Oh, yes. So I had a discussion with this at my last... Dr. Sloat, she's my psychologist. It dawned on me when I was in Calgary, August 26th, and our buddy picked us up and we had dinner, and I started crying because I suddenly got a flashback to this priest that showed up after David was gone.
He was the hospital chaplain.
Yes,
yeah.
And he was Roman Catholic, and I do recall he did not make this situation better. In fact, he made it worse.
Yeah.
And, being 14, I was tired. I was exhausted. To put context to that summer, it was the first summer I was in the HMCS Quadra Senior Band. And it was about 6.5 weeks of intense training. You literally go from 5 a.m. till midnight the entire time.
It's a military cadet thing, right?
Yeah, and I was in the senior band, which is the face of HMCS Quadra, and I was the youngest one to make that band. And it's 6.5 weeks of go, 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 go. But because I was such a shrimp, I was so small physically, I was doing my uniforms till 2 a.m. every day.
Yeah.
Because I had 11 different uniforms that I had to be done. So you do 6.5 weeks of that. You return back to Prince George, my hometown. And then I was sick. I was tired. And, August 29th was shortly thereafter. And I got sick. So I couldn't see my brother that day on his birthday.
And that was because David was in hospital. He'd had...
he lost his kidneys.
He got into some pretty bad drugs, as you do at that age sometimes. And he lost both his kidneys. He had kidney transplant. Right?
Yeah, and they failed. So he was on dialysis.
He was on permanent dialysis, and they had told him, you're never going to be able to eat food. You're always going to have all your nutrients from a pump because you have no kidneys to filter anything.
So, yeah.
And he just couldn't do it. And I actually understand that.
So,
but your mom kind of kept all this from you.
Yeah.
Which made it even worse in some ways.
100% it did. Regardless, moving on, the priest made us feel way worse.
Yeah.
And I said, were you pissed off with what that priest had to say? And this thing went so far into the red.
And stayed there.
The green and the yellow went out.
And it stayed in the red. He was yelling. Yeah, it was pretty clear.
Now I knew without equivocation that was David.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is amazing. I'm honored. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I said to them in the post-exit interviews and stuff, this is a life-changing experience.
It's a gift.
I literally feel like 100 tons that I've been carrying around for 30 some odd years is let go of.
Yeah, I get that.
The fact that I threw that painting away, you know, I threw it away, I brought it back in, I threw it away again, and that was permanent, right?
Yeah.
And it all comes down to Killarney Drive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That bloody house.
So before we go too far off, I want to talk about at the end of it when Jeff said to David, "Do you have a message for us?"
Oh my God. Huh. Yeah. So
and he said yes.
Yes. And this is where Shanley goes through. And there's a methodology. She goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Boom.
Yeah. And then okay, H.
Okay.
And then she starts again.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, U. Boom. And this is not how fast she was going.
No.
You know, I'm trying to speed it up.
So we get to
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Boom. And I'm like, oh my God. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M. Boom.
And then
and Ian says, hug mom.
I could see it in my head. It lit up in my head like
and it goes right off because
Yeah.
Ian said it out loud, hug mom. And it just goes right into the red again. Green light off, yellow light off. And,
and Jason, that's when Jason broke
bawling.
down. Yeah. And Jeff and I was holding you, and then Jeff said, "I'm just seeing him do this," and he was doing the hug arm thing, and he walked over and gave Jason a big hug. He goes, "This is what your brother wants right now for you."
Well, Jeff also said, I'm seeing him right beside you.
Yes. Oh, and then they put the EMF thing beside you, and it was going crazy.
It was right off the charts.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there. I was leaning into Ian like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm sure he might have thought that was all funny. So to discuss about the psychological feedback from my doctor, you know, we were trying to reason through why I was beating myself up over this painting.
Right.
And she said there's kind of two methodologies to think about. You die and you're gone. Lights out. It's like a computer going off, lights going off, and either he won't care. Or two, he goes to a higher plane and again, he doesn't care. But, you know, I think looking back, and I had a psychological session a week later, and she's like, your energy is 100% different.
Yeah.
It's a 180.
Yeah.
And she said, I've seen your growth over the last several years, and you've been just like, woof. But I said, that's because you won't believe who showed up in this investigation. And she looked at me blankly and said, David? And I said, oh my gosh, you got that. And she said, wow. And I like I said in the exiting interview, I said, it's interesting because my entire existence tells me that the universe is the ultimate recycling machine. All energy must remain in it. Doesn't matter. It changes form. We change from liquid into gas into solids, you know. Every atom, every neutron, electron, proton, you go into, you know, physics and you talk about, you know, positrons and dark matter and everything. It all makes up what we are.
But what we figured out kind of at the end of the day, the only thing left, it's not about paintings. It's not about, it's literally about love.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly it. All of this is love.
And that's what connects us ultimately to each other.
That closure was profound.
It was
the ultimate gift I've ever had.
It was incredible. And when we drove away that night, I said to Jason, I'm like, just to be clear, this is not what normally happens. I said, you basically won the lottery of ghost investigations because this is not normal. And you had a rough couple of days after that, really kind of processing it and sorting through it, and not rough in a bad way, but like rough there was a lot of processing to do and a lot of kind of refiling for you to do.
Yeah.
And you did come home and give your mom a hug. Jay's mom lives with us. And so he did come home and he told her what had happened. He gave her a big hug and she was really, really, really grateful for that.
This is interesting because there's been a lot of interesting things happening post
A lot of good things. Yeah.
Yeah. Some
Relationships healed.
Yeah.
Things that we've been trying to do for a long time have been happening. It's been really good. And I wonder, I think we've talked about this a few times, is that the energy David has kind of unleashed or left behind? Like, I think that.
Well, I just got voted in as director of the Gitsan Treaty Society.
Yeah. So you're
I'm a board of a director now.
Yeah.
Like,
For
these
the
things,
band.
I've always wanted to be part of that because I want change.
Yeah.
And it's ironic that this happens just after this. And a very close friend of mine, I won't say his name, reached out to me because he misinterpreted a text I sent a few years ago. And now we've healed that friendship. We've been like brothers for years. And I said to him the other day when he was visiting in the living room, it's like brothers. We're like brothers. We literally are. We're not going to agree with everything that each other have to say. You know, we will piss each other off. That's what brothers do. And he's like, so we just had a timeout. And he's like, wow, that's exactly it. And I said, that's fine.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. It's like that energy that you were holding back in you has broken. Yeah. It's opened. And now all these other things are happening. So it's pretty cool. It was a profound moment. I don't know what's going to show up on the show.
I'm curious.
Shows edit things. It may not even be there. Who knows? Yeah. I don't know what direction they're going to go. But what we do know for both Jason and I, for me, absolutely changed my perspective on ghost investigations because it got so personal. And
that wasn't the scariest part.
No, there was like 3 or 4 different things that happened, and
there was stuff that went way off.
But I just want to focus on
100%.
Your story.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought that was the climax of the night. What happened,
and then it got weirder.
An hour later,
yes,
was actually was genuinely fearful. It was terrifying.
Was scary. Yeah,
it was fearful.
And maybe we'll talk about that another
time, 100%. But you know, we're building this up, and you know what? We haven't even touched the worst part of that night.
We really wanted to talk to you guys just about the personal side of it, because I think we sometimes, when you're telling ghost stories and you're talking about ghost stories, you sometimes forget about that personal side of it, that there is a personal side.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to remember that. And also, your experience is your experience. And we want to honor that as well. And now Jason having had that profound experience, I think it just, and me being there to witness it and support him in that was, I'm really grateful we had that experience together. And I said that to you on that night. I'm really glad we did that. We had that together because it was a huge deal.
They smudged me a second time.
Yeah. Well, when we came upstairs, that was kind of when the cameras were supposed to go off. But because we were all kind of in shock and talking and sharing, they kept the cameras on. So it'll be interesting to see if anything happens then. But yeah, they smudged Jason again. And then when we left, Chief Crowchild gave you a smudge kit too.
Yeah,
so
he did.
Really neat.
Yeah, that was an amazing gift.
Yeah,
I think he was surprised that I had, and was happy that I had closure after 3 decades.
Yeah.
Even my manager at work, because I work in accounting, said your energy is so easygoing now.
Yeah,
you were really easygoing the last year, but now it's you can see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your tension's not there at all anymore.
No, it's
and
cool.
I said it was nice to let go of that.
Yeah.
And, and it was interesting because no sooner than the hug mom came out, he was pretty much gone. I was able to ask a few more questions because we were really trying to establish who else was in the room. I wasn't sure if it was my Gigi. I asked that a couple times and he said no. And Gigi is my grandmother. And then I asked if it's Junior, which is my uncle's deceased son. No. And that's when we established later on the third entity that was beyond furious. But no sooner than I asked those questions, he was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So there's Jason's story that we promised you, and that's kind of pretty much it for our Halloween episode.
I'm so grateful for being able to share that with you. And I like I said to my manager, because she opened up about her family history when I talked about that, and her German ancestry, and she said, I wish I could reach out. That's profound. She said, I wasn't sure if there is anything on the other side. And I said, there 100% is.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And you know what? I'm happy to know that he's not suffering.
No, not at all.
More than anything.
Not at all.
He's he seems
just there.
free.
He's
happy.
energy. He's free. He's happy. Exactly.
How weird is that?
And I love that his one big message was
Hug mom.
hug mom. And we do all the time. So
sad.
it works out.
Sorry, I'm tearing up a bit.
I know, sweetie.
It's hard. And
It's good.
when you was saying, I was pondering it for a bit. The Sunday morning, I was having my coffee in the living room, trying to debunk it.
Yeah, like 5 a.m. You were up pretty early.
Well, yeah, no, I didn't sleep well the
I know.
the 2 nights.
I know.
I knew he was around. I just didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to provoke it. And I wasn't trying to make the show about me. It had nothing to do with me.
No.
But it was...
Oh, we didn't see that coming at all.
Actually, ironically enough, that's not the first time they said the filming that happened in Van Tan Alley, ironically enough, the Cantonese interpreter that they were using, her grandfather came to her.
It was her father, yeah.
He was her father.
She's in her 80s.
Yes.
And she said in Cantonese, she asked her father to come. And he did.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So weird.
Anyway, we want to thank you guys for just
supporting
continuing to support us and listen and share the show, and we're so grateful. And our Halloween episode isn't like it was last year. We did that video episode last year, but we're planning
doing a Christmas
video episode for you. Nice. And I've already started to collect little things for that.
Yes,
we're going to do our Victorian stories again, and I think it's going to be pretty great. I'm excited. But right now we want to take a moment and thank our lovely patrons. Patrons get all kinds of added bonuses. They get the Ghost Stories We Have Heard show.
They get merch.
So they're going to be getting those t-shirts and things. Everyone loves merch. They're going to be getting photos of the places we were in. Things like that, and we're just really grateful for them, and we're so grateful that they continue to support us, because it really does make the show happen. You'll be so proud of me, everybody, when you see this show, The Other Side, because it'll be on next October.
Correct.
And
I think we were episode 6.
I wore Ghosts and Bears t-shirt. You remember?
Yeah, yes.
And a Ghost and Bears hat. So
you.
hopefully you'll get to see the podcast on this show. So we'll see how that works.
It'd be interesting. I really want to show the footage to Mom.
Yeah.
Actually, she did open up. So swinging back to Killarney Drive, she opened up about seeing it. She encountered the presence. She finally said...
She just didn't want to tell you she didn't want to freak out, which is a very mom thing to do.
So she asked the guy... if he murdered his wife, and he didn't say anything. So she went across the street to ask Mrs. Fox, who owned Fox Glass, that became Speedy Glass. And Mrs. Fox said there was suspicions because she was killed, but they couldn't prove it.
Right.
So I don't know if that was him that was influencing all that negative behavior in the basement, or if he was influenced by the other thing. But regardless, it was surprising to hear Mom. And she said, "You have this gift. Vernon has it, I have it, and you have it." But
and the weird thing is, I was told that as well by my biological mother.
Yes, you were.
That I inherited the gifts from my great grandmother, who was the wise one for the village. And so it's really weird that you and I got together and we both had these kind of hereditary gifts. It's weird.
Well, Patty actually asked me that. We were having a business meeting in accounting, but she just, sometimes we'll discuss things like how our personal things before other people get there.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Do you think that's how you and Ian got together?"
Could be.
And could be. You never know.
It's a much deeper connection than.
But I definitely know there's something else out there. 100%.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of the coolest part of all this.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's kind of the coolest part of this show.
Yeah.
And providing this community for people who have experienced weird things and have nowhere else to talk about it.
It's very true.
So we're very grateful that you guys are with us.
It's not BS.
So speaking of those lovely people, we want to thank specifically our patrons. They are Gina,
Elise,
Sharon,
Dawn,
Adam,
Bryce,
Sherry,
Brooks,
Marion,
Kathleen,
Alexa,
Debbie,
Jackie,
Ruth,
Mary Frances,
Gina and Victoria,
Sandy,
Christopher,
David,
Ashley,
Jeremiah,
Elizabeth,
BB Nix,
Melinda,
Jordan,
Tammy,
James,
Taya,
Eben,
Arwen,
Steve,
Kyle and Charlotte,
Catherine,
Myri.
Thank you guys so much for all your support and for hanging in there with us and just being this amazing support network for what we're doing. I also want to remember, if you're interested, I mentioned our Ghosts and Bears shirt that I wore. We do have a Redbubble shop.
Yeah, it's Redbubble.
Yeah, it's just you go redbubble.com and then put in Ghosts and Bears, and there's 6 different designs you can take advantage of, and I think they have stuff on like everything, like phone cases and stickers and wall art and accessories, and they've got everything, but mostly a lot of clothing. So if you want to rep our podcast out in the world, which of course we'd be grateful for, check out Redbubble. Great place to get Christmas presents for your favorite podcast listener. And also, if you just are looking to help us out, don't forget, you can always become a Patreon member and go that way. Also, give us a 5-star review on iTunes. That's super helpful, because the more people who do that, the more we show up in the algorithms. So that's important as well.
That's cool.
And don't forget, you can always find us on Instagram and Facebook, just Ghosts and Bears. And if you have had a story of your own that you would like one day to show up on the show, we'd love to hear it. Ghosts and Bears at gmail.com. Other than that, we want to say happy Halloween, because it is days away.
Spooky Halloween.
And please make sure you're safe. Make sure everyone around you is safe. And please remember, all of this talk of ghosts and ghost stories and things like that, in the end, it all boils down to energy, connection, and love. And that's pretty much what it is.
That's shocking.
It is
love for the most part.
Absolutely. So thanks, everybody. Please remember, we're the ghost podcast that is going to bring you the actual ghost story
with the actual history
from the actual place, and hopefully one day soon
that place will be with you,
and we can't wait to be there. Have a happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.